conveniently displayed on their roofs. Bones took us above where we thought her street was, and then zoomed downward in a straight line, landing us in the middle of some tall hedges. The ground shuddered, and our feet went ankle-deep into the earth, from an impact far harder than usual. I immediately crouched into a kneeling position, helping to distribute some of the force. It still hurt like hell, but with this area bordering downtown, and lots of people window shopping, seeking dinner or otherwise strolling around, we couldn't afford to glide to an easy landing and be spotted with almost every cell phone having recording capabilities. We'd be on the news and internet before you could say compromised supernatural security. Then not only would we be in deep shit with the vampire law guardians, but Madigan with his facial recognition software, programmed to flag my image, would also know exactly where we were. "All right, love?" Bones asked, shaking off any injuries from the equivalent of being dropped like a bowling ball from 5,000 feet, faster than I could find. I gritted out, wincing at the pain that shot through my back. When I stood up, I might have saved my legs by kneeling, but my angle must have been wrong, because I heard several things pop in my spine upon standing. A few sharp tingles later and the pain was gone. Nothing beat being a vampire. When it came to healing abilities, Bones took some sage out of his pockets and lit it. I did the same, careful not to let any of the burnt edges fall to the ground. There were dry, crinkled leaves everywhere, and starting a fire would be a great way to draw a lot of unwanted attention to us. We came out of the hedges and started walking toward the nearest intersection, as though we were a normal couple out for a stroll. From the mutters I picked up on, the people closest to the spot where we'd landed were wondering about the noise and the momentary vibration they'd felt, but thankfully hadn't connected those things with two people dropping out of the sky. With how fast we'd descended, we would have been nothing more than a brief streak, even to someone who'd been looking right at that spot. "That's Cook Street," Bones said low, nodding at the street sign in front of us. "Sixth should be coming up." His voice trailed off, tension ringing from his aura like invisible fire alarms. I followed the direction of his stare, dread creeping up my spine. A tunic-clad man floated in the middle of the street, white hair unmoving in the breeze. Cars drove right through him, the drivers unaware that they just come in contact with one of history's most prolific serial killers. And even though he was too far away from me to see his eyes, I knew the Inquisitor was staring right at us. Our arrival in the neighborhood hadn't gone unnoticed by everyone. "Bones," I said softly, "I'll draw him off you. Go get her and then meet up with me." His lips barely moved, but I could still hear his hushed reply, "I'm not leaving you." We only had seconds before Cromer attacked. Already the ghost was starting toward us, and I knew it wasn't to shake our hands and say howdy. "Neighbors, you're a man." Not tempting enough for him, I whispered rapidly. "But you're stronger and faster than I am. So you're that woman's best chance if she's still alive. Now quit arguing and go." So saying, I handed my sage to Bones and ran right toward Cromer, making sure to wave my arms so he'd see I didn't carry any of that ghostly flamethrower anymore behind me. Bones ground out a curse, but I didn't turn around. I was right and he knew it. He might not like it, but that didn't change the reality. Now to get Cromer to come after me, instead of protecting his final target. Unless he'd killed her already. What happened with Francine should have shown him that he couldn't stop us from taking her. I hoped he decided to unleash some of his frustration over that on me. instead of spending those last few moments with her. "Hey Casper." The ugly ghost I called out. When Kramer seemed more focused on what Bones was doing than on my closing in on him. "But I can whack that stubby jaw before you can catch me." That turned the heads of the other people on the sidewalk. But my attention was all for the hazy figure in the monkish tunic. I was now close enough to see Cromer's nostrils flare at my, reminding him of the 2 punches I'd landed during the brief time when he'd been solid. He glanced behind me again though, as if still deciding whom to attack. "Take the bait," I urged him, and then dove to cover the last several feet between us. "Here comes bitch slap number 3. I announced, swinging my hand through his jaw. He wasn't solid, so my fist flew through harmlessly. But either the gesture or the words made up his mind. Cromer spat out a curse and rounded on me. His own arm shooting out, I ducked. But not fast enough. Pain burst through the side of my head. The energy he managed to harness, feeling even stronger than a punch from solid flesh. Would have I caught myself before barreling into a store's front window, crashing into the wall instead. At least that only chipped off some plaster, instead of shattering glass. Then I spun around to face the ghost. "That was pathetic," I snapped. "I don't even need Sage to fight you. You're pussy enough all on your own." His face twisted with rage, and a torrent of German erupted from his mouth. I took that as my signal to run for it, darting through the throngs of people, going about their business. On this lovely autumn evening, I had made it as far as an outdoor sports bar, when it felt like a wrecking ball crashed into my back. It sent me flying forward. Completely off balance, I managed to turn enough to avoid the family with the small children, and instead crashed into a table with several young men crouched over beer pitchers and chicken wings. The table broke under my impact. Foamy liquid glasses and orange-smeared chicken parts splattering over me. The 4 men who'd been seated around it stared down at me in disbelief, 2 of them still holding chicken in their hands. "What's your problem, lady?" one of them gasped. They couldn't see that a ghost had blasted me into them. But did they really think I just dived into their table out of boredom? From my vantage point on the floor, I could see Cromer approaching, his form disappearing every time he had to poltergeist through someone in his way. I glanced back at the quartet of young men, desperately trying to think of something that would make them and the other patrons run away before the ghost got here. "I'm on the rag and desperate for attention," I improvised, remembering Graham's derisive thoughts from that day at my old house. "So if you want to live, get the hell away from me." With that, I shoved the remains of the table at them, doing it slow enough so they could avoid it. They leapt out of its path and started backing away. Thankfully, they weren't the only ones. The outdoor seating area quickly began to clear of people. "Crazy bitch," I heard. But my attention was all for the ghost. He was only a dozen feet away now, his mouth opening in a snarl. I needed to get him clear of these people before he decided to start killing some of them. "Just for fun, come and get me, limp dick," I yelled, vaulting over the wall. A less crowded section of shops was on the other side. Parked cars lining the streets, but their owners mostly elsewhere. I didn't look back to see if Cromer had taken the bait, but continued in my stream of insults while running flat out. I know that whole bit about witches depriving men of their virile members was just your excuse for not being able to get it up. Unless you could, something smashed into my back, sending an explosion of pain through me. It also threw me off balance. I ended up skidding down the sidewalk face first, my velocity carrying me several feet. before whatever he'd done to my back healed. Enough for me to stagger to my feet. As soon as I did, an invisible sledgehammer landed in my gut, knocking me back to my knees. Someone screamed, I couldn't see who, because my vision was blurry and filled with red. I spat out blood-sickening, crunching noises, sounding with that slight movement of my jaw. My face burned like it had been set on fire. But I got up again, braced for the blow I knew would come. Get away from the people, away from the people. I repeated to myself, no matter what he did to me, I'd heal. They wouldn't. I made it a few feet, barely seeing where I was going, because though I could feel my face mending, I still had blood in my eyes. Then I heard an ominous metallic boom, and white-hot pain exploded all through my body. Lights flashed in my vision, and my ears rang with the sound of crunching metal and shattering glass. Now I really couldn't see, but the smell of gasoline and the tremendous weight pressing on me. Let me diagnose what had just happened. Motherfucking ghost up-ended a car on me. I didn't have time to be stunned at how much stronger the proximity to Halloween had made Cromer, because the acrid scent warned me that I needed to move. Now, the ghost was probably busy trying to score a lighter, or make lots of sparks, to ignite all that flammable liquid contained in the fuel tank. On top of me, I'd had a car explode next to me once before, and it had almost killed me, being trapped underneath one. If it went off, I'd be all the way dead. No doubt about it. I tensed every muscle in my body, ignoring the flares of pain that were multiple broken bones, trying to knit back together, and then heaved up with all of my strength. Agony flashed through me, making me momentarily dizzy, but the weight moved off as far as my arms and legs could stretch. Another blisteringly painful heave, and I slithered out from under it, letting it fall back down with a crash once I was clear. Several blinks later and I could see enough to be dismayed at the cluster of people gathered nearby, each of them displaying varying degrees of shock. I didn't see any phones held up capturing footage, though, so I had to be grateful for that. Then I caught sight of someone else staring at me. Cromer floated in the empty space along the road, where the car had been parked. His green gaze locked onto me with unrelenting intensity. I didn't know why he wasn't zooming in for another of those bone-cracking energy shots, but damned if I'd just stand here and pose for him until he got around to it. I whirled, pointing myself in the least populated direction of the street, and then started to run. More bones crunched, and my skin felt like I'd been staked on an anthill before I finished healing. But I didn't stop running, waiting for the next blast of pain that would signal Cromer catching up with me. I heard a whoosh, and then something hard pressed into my gut. My instant defensive reaction stilled when I recognized the power flooding around me, crackling the air with hidden currents. The ground left my feet as I was yanked upward, one strong arm around my midsection, the other locked around someone, screaming in a high-pitched, feminine voice. That scream was the sweetest music I'd heard, because it meant Bones got to Cromer's last intended victim in time to save her. Chapter 31. Once we'd gone high and far enough away that we knew Cromer couldn't have followed, Bones texted Spade and told him to meet us at War Eagle Park, where I-29 was closest to the Missouri River. It had been over an hour since we left, Cromer raging on the ground, but we still wouldn't risk taking the woman directly to Spade's and giving the ghost even the smallest chance to track her there. Through me, her name was Sarah, and she hadn't settled down much since Bones took her away from her house. Not that I blamed her if that flight hadn't been enough to scare her senseless. It only took 5 minutes talking to her to realize that Cromer had tormented Sarah to the very edge of sanity. With Francine and Lisa out of his reach, he'd clearly made up for lost time with her. Just as I'd feared he would. Sarah's thoughts were a mixture of white noise, terror and repetitions of the same crap Cromer had spouted to me about not suffering witches to live and his being unstoppable bones. And I told her she could trust us, making sure our eyes were lit up when we said it. But she seemed past the point of being calmed by our gazes. Some people, for reasons of genetic anomaly, trauma or staunch willpower, needed to be bitten first before vampire mind control would work. But I couldn't bring myself to bite her. On top of everything else, she didn't try to run. So maybe some of what we told her was getting through. Even though the poor woman jumped at every noise, gaze darting about, as if expecting Cromer to pop up and continue his abuse. I could only hope that a few days of being around Francine and Lisa would help bring Sarah back from what seemed to be a near mental breakdown. Of course, what would really help Sarah and the other women would be for us to manage to stuff their tormentor into that stone and mineral trap. Then they could take all the time they needed to heal from the emotional damage he'd inflicted on them. Anger burned through me. Most murderers I'd encountered, while still vile to the bone, only sought to destroy people's bodies. But that wasn't enough for Cromer. He had to crush their minds, hearts and spirits too. Spade descended from the night's canvas, and Sarah reared back, the scent of fear exploding out of her pores. Guess seeing another person drop out of the sky was too much for her right now. I held on to her, murmuring that he was a friend, and she'd be safe with him. Only when I told her that he'd take her to Francine and Lisa did she calm down enough to stop trying to pull away. I told her about the other 2 women Cromer had set his sights on, and how they were safe. Words were nice, but seeing them for herself would do more to prove to her badly wounded psyche that Cromer wasn't the all-powerful punisher he'd made himself out to be than any reassurances I could give her. Bones walked over to his friend with a last pitying glance her way, taking Spade off to the side to warn him about her fragile mental state. I assumed after a minute of hushed conversation they came back. The other vampire held out a bundle to her that I gratefully recognized was a coat. Bones and I left so fast to retrieve her. We hadn't thought to grab our own coats, let alone bring an extra one for her. Sarah, this is my very good mate, Spade, Bones said, calling him by his chosen name instead of the one he normally used. He will take excellent care of you. She took the coat but then edged closer to me. Hey, aren't you coming too? Her dark topaz gaze was pleading. Fragmented thoughts, revealing that she didn't want to go without me. It might be because I was another woman, and that made me feel safer to her. Or because Spade looked rather imposing, with his great height and black coat surrounding him. Our proximity to the river even had his shoulder-length hair blowing dramatically around his face, adding to the effect. But in addition to being trustworthy, Spade also had a deep chivalrous streak. I can't come now, but I'll see you soon, I promised her, exchanging a glance with Bones. Real soon, considering we'd deliver the trap to Spades in the next couple days, and then wait for my inner signal to lead Crammer right to us. Wait until Sarah found that out. Then she'd be extra nervous. Or maybe we'd be lucky, and she'd know who the accomplice was. 2 out of 3 women had fit the same pattern before Cromer started attacking them, and I was betting Sarah wouldn't be the exception. Sarah, you had a cat recently. Didn't you? I asked her. One who died. Do you happen to know how it happened or who did it? Her thoughts seized with that question, making it hard to pick out the coherent ones from their less stable, scattered counterparts. I caught words like hung and break in, though confirming my belief. Francine and Lisa's cats had been hung too, their little bodies left on display. Step 1 in the beginning of Cromer's reign of torment. Do you know who did it? I pressed. She shook her head, getting so visibly upset that Bones nudged me. Let her get settled first, kin, he murmured. She'll be better able to answer questions with Denise and the others. He was right. This was too soon, and it was a long shot that she'd know who killed her cat anyway. I gave Sarah a quick hug goodbye, telling her again that this would all be over soon, and she'd be safe. God, let that be true. I prayed. Spade held out his arm to Sarah, as if he were offering to escort her to a ball. Please come with me, he said. She looked at me. I nodded, forcing a smile. He'll take you to the others, and I'll see you soon. With obvious reluctance, she took Spade's arm. Spade gave a last nod to me, and Bones then swooped Sarah up and winged her away, with all the flair of those old Dracula movies that the real Vlad Tepes hated. A scream trailed after them, growing fainter, until Sarah's voice was lost to the darkness. I turned to Bones with a slight smile. Beam me up, Scotty. His snort was soft with amusement. You don't need me for that. You can beam yourself now. I know, I said, sliding my arms around him. But I'd rather fly like this. His arms circled around me, strong, hard, and infinitely blissful. So would I, kitten. Much later, I heard the distinct rustle of boards on the porch. That said someone was out there. Had to be Cromer. I stayed seated on the family room floor, with my back propped against the wall, and debated ignoring him if I moved. Bones might wake up and he'd just fallen asleep. It was my turn to make sure all the sage stayed lit, while everyone else slept. Kramer had been known to chuck branches or boards at sage jars to knock them over, trying either to burn us down or extinguish the repelling smoke. Neither was an option we wanted to explore. Hence the shifts if left up to Bones. He'd split up the watches between himself and Ian. But that wouldn't be fair. My mother couldn't help her weariness as soon as dawn struck, but I could stay awake as well as the men could. All of us slept in the family room, sharing the 4 mattresses that we'd brought in from the bedrooms. It might not be comfortable, and it sure as hell wasn't romantic, but it was safer if by chance the watch person did fall asleep, and Cromer managed to sneak past the sage and get in. He wouldn't be able to single out the most vulnerable of us without waking all the rest. Not with the way we slept, clustered around each other. Another creak of the boards sounded outside, but this time it was followed by a whisper I couldn't make out. I frowned. That was unusual for Cromer. He normally liked to bash about while stringing curses together, as loud as he could squawk. The ghost knew when we slept too, so he frequently stopped by at dawn for maximum pain in the ass effect. But whispers, it made me curious enough to get up. It might be Fabian or Elizabeth, unable to venture inside because of the sage, and trying to be considerate by not waking everyone with a loud greeting. I crept toward the door, keeping as quiet as I could. No need for everyone to wake up and investigate. The odd whisper. Bones stirred, but his eyes remained closed. My mother was dead to the world. Tyler's snores continued uninterrupted, and Ian didn't even twitch. I couldn't help shaking my head as I looked at him. Ian slept like a baby every morning. Well, A baby who continually kept one hand down his pants. Guess his misdeeds didn't bother his conscience enough to cost him a moment of shut-eye. Carefully, still trying not to wake the others, I opened the front door to my surprise. It was Cromer, floating over the far side of the ruined porch. Instead of Fabian or Elizabeth, he let go of one of the loose boards when he saw me, beckoning me forward with almost a friendly gesture. "Oh sure. I'll come right over without getting any sage." First I thought, did he think slamming that car on me had knocked my brains loose? I gave him the finger, and then picked up 2 of the nearest jars of sage, deciding to go a few feet away from the door, only because I wanted to give everyone else a few more moments of sleep. If Cromer kept to his usual form, he'd be cursing and hurling boards at the house soon enough. The Inquisitor didn't respond to my fingered opinion. He simply waited without moving or speaking, while I walked over, without making a sound, on the rickety remains of the porch. I kept the door open, and though I ventured away from it, I made sure to stay within 2 good lunges. "Fancy seeing you again," I said, keeping my voice low. That moss-green gaze raked me from head to toe, but not in the sleazy way he'd done on other occasions. This time it was the gaze of an enemy, sizing up his opponent and finding her lacking. "Do you truly believe that you, a mere woman, can defeat me?" Aside from the gender insult, this was the most rational I'd ever seen Cromer. He sounded genuinely thoughtful, and his voice was as quiet as mine. A huge departure from his normal trumpeted "witches will burn" rants. I could respond to his question by listing all the other arrogant bastards I'd taken down over the years, or by pointing out that I'd already defeated his plans for Francine, Sarah and Lisa by putting them out of his reach for now. But I preferred to remain underestimated. "Don't worry about widow girly me, big bad monster. I'm harmless. Talk is meaningless. We'll know who's defeated whom when it's all over. And there's only one of us left standing," I replied from the faint scraping sound. Someone in the house had woken up and was headed toward the door. Before he got there, I knew it was Bones from the brushes of his aura. Even whispers had disturbed his light sleep. Kramer didn't seem to notice. His attention didn't waver from me. "Though you are a woman, you are strong," the ghost said, still in that same musing way. "You pushed the car aside as if it had no effect. Actually, it had hurt like hell. Under other circumstances, I might have stayed under it, saying things like ow ow, ow while I waited to heal. But I didn't have the luxury at the time. You're not the first person who's tried to kill me with a car," was what I said, shrugging as if either time hadn't been a big deal. I could feel that Bones was in the doorway, but he didn't come out, keeping concealed from the ghost in the shadows of the doorframe. Cromer smiled, cold and calculating. "I knew it would not kill you." Interesting now that he mentioned it. He hadn't been running around trying to ignite the fuel tank while I was briefly trapped under it. Didn't it occur to him to try to blow the car up? Or was he lying about knowing the car wouldn't kill me? Far be it for me to understand the mental workings of a maniac. "What's with quiet chatting instead of your usual blustering?" I asked, changing the subject. "You lonely because Francine, Lisa and Sarah are out of your reach? So you have no one to talk to? Please get pissed and tell me who your accomplice is." I silently urged him, "Go on. Impress me with how much time you spend with whoever that prick is." But he didn't. He gave me another of those contemplative looks instead. "Why do you risk so much for them? They are nothing to you." "No. They're nothing to you," I corrected at once. "But they mean something to me. Because they're in trouble. And I can help." If I only put my ass on the line for people I loved, I'd be no better than half the monsters I've hunted. Even evil people risk themselves for loved ones. Just because you picked women I don't know doesn't mean I'm going to sit on the sidelines and let them die. His smile grew, showing those brownish molars in between gaps of gums. I couldn't help but think it was poetic justice that he would keep that nasty mouth all through eternity. Hopefully while locked in a homemade jail. You still believe you can stop me, Hex? But you can't. You don't fear me. But soon you will know. I won't, I replied sharply. You won't draw any strength from me. Because I've got your number. Inquisitor you might be. Harder to kill with your whole lack of a physical body. But you're no scarier than all the other assholes that are now dead. While I'm still standing until saw one was all he said. And then vanished from sight. I stared at the spot where he'd been. A smile of my own twisting my mouth. That's what I'm counting on, fucker. Chapter 32. On October 30th. As soon as night's concealing veil fell, Ian, Bones and I flew away from the tattered farmhouse. Each of us was carrying a large tarp-draped object. My mother and Tyler were staying behind, leaving for Spades tomorrow afternoon, via a more conventional mode of transportation. A taxicab that way. In case my borrowed abilities had faded. To where Cromer couldn't locate me. By concentrating alone, he could follow them to Spades' house. They take plenty of sage with them, in case the ghost did more than trail them. But my money was on Cromer's trying to be sly and staying unseen after all. They weren't the targets he'd so carefully picked out. Francine, Lisa and Sarah were who Cromer really wanted. And we wanted to be sure he found his way to them. Once we had everything in place anyway. That was why we didn't fly our large bundles right to Spades. We went to a defunct building that had formerly been a combined sewer overflow facility in Ottawa instead. Underneath the building a series of storm drains, tunnels and sewers led to the Des Moines River. It wasn't as perfect a setting as our cave, with its underground river. And it smelled a damn sight worse, even though it hadn't been operational in years. But it would suffice. Bones had his co-ruler. Mancaries purchased the building and its surrounding riverside property over the past couple weeks, using a dummy corporation. Couldn't risk someone else tearing this down to put a new business up and disturbing what we hoped would be Heinrich Kramer's final resting place. Now we just had to carve a hole in the underground trunk sewer, deep enough to reach the river's water table, so that we could ensure the flow of fresh water around where we intended to place the trap. It had taken Bones and me, plus Chris's team, a week to lay the previous trap in place. We had exactly 5 hours to set this one up. And we had carving up the trunk sewer to contend with. 2. I didn't want to calculate how long our odds were, trying to focus instead on how powerful Bones, Spade and Ian were. I'd do my damnedest too. And either we would finish or we wouldn't. The only thing that was certain was there was no time for hand-wringing. We landed outside the empty facility, and I set my heavy section of the trap down as soon as my feet hit the ground. Flying for an hour while toting that bulk made me appreciate how effortlessly Bones carried me when we flew together. Granted, I weighed less than this hunk of rock, but he'd also flown while carrying me, and at least one other person, and he made it look easy, even while going faster and farther. Brilliant landing, Ian commented, giving a pointed look at the long furrow I'd carved in the earth. When I touched down, we're trying to keep a low profile. And here, you've gone and made it look like a meteorite hit. I'd been proud of myself for not blasting through the side of the building. Staying in the air was far easier than landing. So I snootily lifted my nose at him. I'm less than 2 years undead and I'm already flying. How long did it take you to find your wings? Pretty boy. Bones snorted at the indignation on Ian's face. He was nothing if not competitive. You had that coming, mate. Power Leech Ian replied sulkily. He had me there, but Bones laughed. You'd both give your stones to have that ability. Not to mention she flew before turning into a vampire. So that's hers alone if you're through squabbling. A smooth voice called out from the building. Perhaps we can set about securing this trap. Spade was already here. Good. I looked at my large chunk of rock in the entrance to the building. Then I cracked my knuckles. First things first, and that would be making a new door. Large enough for all the pieces to fit through. I only hoped the tunnels leading to the trunk sewer were wide enough not to need their own form of remodeling. The 5-hour countdown had just begun. 4 hours and 22 minutes later. Ian stared at the reassembled trap. Secured in the bottom of the trunk sewer. Water sloshing over it from the adjoining hole. We'd torn through to reach the Des Moines River.